record to computer, and we will go from there. So good morning, everybody. Thank you very much to both the panelists that are joining me this morning, but also those of you that are attending live. And obviously, thank you if you're tuning in to watch what is now the second installment of this webinar. With me this morning, I'm going to go around the room very, very quickly, just get everybody to say hello. My name's Simon Townsend. I'm from IGEL. I've been working in the EUC space for about 20 years, along with many of these folks. And this morning, we really want to talk about what we're seeing going on in the market and what perhaps some of our predictions for 2021 are. Adam, can I start with you? Just quickly introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Adam Harding, and I'm the Chief Technologist for Workspace at Softcat.
Thank you, Adam. Kyle, over to you.
Hi guys, I'm Kyle Davis. I am the Practice Lead for Integrated Technology Architecture at CDW.
Excellent. Mikkel?
Hi, Michael Overstedt. I'm the Lead Architect for Digital Workplace at ATEA Sweden.
Thank you. And Peter?
Michael, not Mikhail, Simon. Come on.
I know.
It's all right.
Point that out. I'm going to have to edit that out now.
Yeah.
Pierre, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's Peter Ely, not Eli, and I'm the EUC practice lead at Bytes.
Good. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's just reminded me that I got his name wrong on the last video as well. Thank you, so we are expecting to be joined by Dieter from the Netherlands very, very shortly. He's had to jump onto a quick customer call, so no doubt he will join us as we go along this call. So, you know, we held one of these sessions when we did Digital Disrupt back in September. We sort of brought the 5 or 6 of us together. We obviously all work for either vendors or partners in the EUC space, deploying things like VDI and desktop as a service. We spoke then about what we'd seen regarding work from home and the pandemic. First question to everybody, has anything changed since the last time we spoke? Have there been any developments in terms of what you're seeing people deploy? Have people changed their strategy? Are people rethinking what they're doing from an EUC point of view as they now go into the end of the year and into next? Adam?
Yeah, well, I think it's more of development on the theme more than anything else. I think people, we're all fully aware that during the pandemic, people got things done, and now is very much the time of getting it done well. So I think it was very tactical, and now we're taking a more strategic perspective on the topics. So lots of people really looking to modern management for their devices, because they've just, you know, the promise of coming back to work after 3 months or 6 months is long gone. So people are really looking at how do I deploy, manage, update devices out in the field and keep them safe and secure for both the employees and the employer. I'm seeing a lot of people really look to WVD specifically, but cloud desktops as a strategic play. Some people are looking to use them in production, but almost everybody's looking to have at least some kind of footprint in the cloud desktop world, whether it's WVD or AWS or whatever, for DR and business continuity purposes. And I think the thing I've also noticed is that because the users are so widely distributed and it's not easy to shout over your shoulder and see how people are getting on, there's also been a bit of a shift towards how do I do kind of inventory management and understand what's out there? How do I do monitoring and performance monitoring to see how it's behaving? And actually, not just that quantitative side, but the qualitative side of how do I speak to my users? So there's a lot of activity around surveying and interviewing and doing forum groups to really get a far more regular pulse on where things are working well and where they're not, to advise on those strategies. Yeah. Long answer. I hope everybody else has got something left to say.
No, some valid points. Lots that I could definitely come on. Peter, what about you?
Yeah, similar, to be honest, to what Adam's saying. I mean, I think everyone's done a very sort of tactical in-place solution for the time being. And if they have had VDI, they've just kind of incorporated that as part of the solution. But we're now having conversations with customers where if VDI wasn't on the table before, certainly is now. And you know, to Adam's point, they're considering cloud options as a main priority first of all. And I certainly think as though they're looking at, because I don't think everyone is considering work from home as a permanent thing. They are looking at the return to work scenario and the return to office scenario, but they're looking at, what if this happens again? You know, we've got to be prepared for all sorts of scenarios. So, you know, 6 months down the line, we might be back in the office, but then 3 months further to that, there might be another lockdown. So we need to be prepared. And that's where people are starting to strategically align themselves for.
What, Kyle, what are people calling that now? So are people still referring it to work from home, or have they moved on and they're calling it mobile working or the future of work? I mean, does it matter? And what are people referring to it as?
I don't think it really matters, right? I think it's just agile working, whether that's from home offices, on a beach somewhere. As long as you can get access to the right data applications and from any device, anywhere, anytime, that usual thing we've all been talking about for many, many years, then people should be able to do their job. And kind of touching back on the previous points from what I've been seeing as well is people readdressing their strategy, looking at the technical debt they've accrued during this pandemic, which is something they're trying to get their hands around and to get it back under control to an extent. But some even simpler things, right? Let's just take a step back into like field engineering, desktop support kind of scenarios, right? And you've got people now at home distributed across any location in the world. How do you get a new device to someone if their device breaks in a timely manner? How do you make sure that they can get a break fix or a hardware break fix solution done on time? How do you get that kind of same experience you would have had in an office, but now disparate across anywhere in the world? And that's a big challenge for everybody, because I don't think there's a single answer right now, because anyone could be living anywhere. But there's those kind of challenges that people are addressing, especially if they're looking at not reopening offices, which a lot of people have come out and stated. I personally think there should be offices open. I think I mentioned this last time around mental well-being and all that kind of stuff. But from my point of view, what I'm kind of seeing now is this insurgence of reviewing what we've done, getting it back under control, and expanding it for an agile workforce. So how do we make sure that people can do their job anywhere, anytime, whether it's in VDI, whether it's a distributed PC platform, whether it's desktop as a service, device as a service, whatever. What is the right strategy for us as an organization? And does it meet our strategic outcomes? And if it doesn't, why are we looking at it? That's what I'm seeing a lot of customers come to us and have a conversation about. One other thing I want to quickly mention as well, though, is I had one customer on the other week that told me a horror story where they've got obviously multiple people connecting to their home network to connect into various platforms. Both people in this household were using standard VPN technologies to get into their environment, split tunneling enabled on both sides. Does that bridge your network from two organizations as well over that home network? Security risk. And it's things like that people aren't really thinking about. We've just thrown VPN out there and we've thrown various other solutions to get people working. But what are the repercussions? The weakest footprint on security is now people's homes, because people are at home. It's easy to get in someone's house, but it's not as easy to get in someone's office.
Yeah. That's a scary thought. Michael, what about you? I mean, Adam mentioned modern device management, right? I mean, we all know that, you know, Microsoft Intune and Workspace ONE and other solutions are out there that obviously offer these capabilities of modern management, particularly in a Windows and a Mac environment. Is it true to say that, you know, SCCM and those types of traditional PC lifecycle management tools are now dead and they're no use to us because everyone's gone to home?
I think it's a little bit overreacting to say they are dead, but we have a lot of customers that's going hybrid at the moment, just to be able to have the home offices or the home devices managed in one way, and the devices that are still in place in the offices managed in another way. They don't really do the same thing. We are going to go to management. We have a lot of customers that are tearing down their VPN environment and so on, and managing the device the modern way and securing it the modern way. because I don't think that we are going to use VPN as a security in the future. In the Nordics, we talk a lot about the new normal, and we still see that even if we haven't had that massive lockdown in the Nordics that many other countries had, but we still see that, I mean, about 30-40% of the users ain't going to go back to the offices.
Yeah.
They are going to move farther from the cities. They can work wherever they want. They don't need to live in the big cities. They don't need to live in the concrete and all that. They can live in a farm if they want to, and still do the same job. And the challenge that arises from that is to be able to get people to work in the same platform, at the same processes, doing the same thing, whatever they are in the offices or if they are working from home. And that's going to be quite a big of a challenge, both for leaders, because it's going to demand a different leadership within the organization. The security stuff is as important as well, and the platforms. There are three big challenges for the future.
Yeah. So, I mean, all of you have spoken about the need for more agile, more mobile working, spoken about some challenges around security and VPNs. What is the main reason that people are having to rethink and address how they look after their employees and do end user compute? Security, supply chain issues, management? Is it an IT operations problem? Is it a security problem? What do we think?
I think that the main reasons people are doing this are not IT reasons. You know, it's an IT enabled answer, but really it's about how do I give my employees not just a great IT experience, but a great employment experience. I think it's about also being laser focused on your customer experience and the fact that we know that the channels in which our customers and your customers engage with us have been disrupted, and we need to be wherever they are. So I think that type of thing is what really drives it. So all the old adages of, you know, digitization, moving things from analog to digital, and digitalization, which is moving things, not changing the way you work, but applying new technologies to help you keep on keeping on that bit faster and better. And then that last shift, which is the transformation bit, where you look at, well, it's not about the historic approach of mapping our business processes to technology. It's about this time looking at the potential that technology can bring and asking ourselves, how can we change the way we work to make the most of the potential, the stuff that was never on the table last time we looked. So I think that type of how do we give the most immersive and valuable customer experience and try and not get anybody to look elsewhere for any products, I think that's what's driving it, and then making sure that our employees are safe and engaged and enthusiastic about bringing innovation to your own company. I think that's where it starts, and then, you know, those things translate into greater flexibility of locations and time and applications you use and devices and all that kind of stuff, which is fine. But to then support that, you have to reassess thing one, how do we secure this? Well, actually, they can come at us from any angle with anything at any time. And that's really about trying to get your head around your use of data and who gets it and their access scenarios and all that type of stuff. And that basically we've thrown a massive stone in the pond and the water's all over the place. That's what we've got to cope with. That's why we're having to reassess it. I didn't mention it earlier, but actually one of the other things that certainly has a bit of a tailwind at the moment is a focus on identity and access management, because I think that people are not currently ready to take on all of these different SaaS applications that are coming to them, all the different VDI platforms, all the different devices, whether it's personally owned or company owned. So I think there's been a real wake-up call for a lot of organizations that their identity and access management element is just not where it needs to be. I also think that there was a bit of confusion around things like a lot of people are moving to Azure AD as a single identity provider. But the reality is that getting all your identities into one place is not the same as being able to assess you know, the 50, 60, 70 different privileges and permissions that are available for every single one of your SaaS applications that are coming along, and putting something robust in place to help you manage those permissions and that access. So I think that side of things has really driven, wow, a big wake-up call on we need to look at identity and access management and security as a starting point. When you get the foundations right for that, you really are set to then start building. But I think we built the house backwards a little bit. And to be in fairness, with the pandemic, a lot of people have been building the plane in flight, which is an interesting thing for all of us to do.
Yeah. Carl?
Yeah, I'd agree with a lot of that, especially around the identity and access management. And especially if we think about the market from our customers' perspective, where if they're doing well during this pandemic for whatever reason, they maybe look to acquire and do mergers and all those kind of things. And that's where having that robust IAM solution comes in to help those mergers and acquisitions as well. If we just look at the reseller space that we generally mostly sit in the UK, a lot of those smaller resellers that may have been struggling during the pandemic have been ultimately bought out by the larger players to backfill on people and headcount or capability, or bring some nicheness to your business or whatever it might be. So we've seen a lot of that just in our own industry, never mind all the other industries that we ultimately serve. I think on the element of security, right, and we touched on this last time around monitoring and being able to understand user behaviors as well as the productivity impact and all that kind of stuff. And there's many products that can do that kind of stuff. But just to bring that up again from a security point of view, you can only make change once you understand what's already there. And you can only really secure things if you really understand what's happening. So the monitoring is quite key, whether it's anonymized, that you can make sure that for specific worker councils and various things in various European countries, we're not breaking law. The main thing for me is getting visibility across your entire stack, from your edge to your data center, and then making decisions that secure your your IP ultimately, as well as your users from themselves where possible. And where we can automate reactions to that, the resolutions using AI services and ML services, I think that's the best way to go. I think that's where a lot of people have been looking at how they get control over this technical debt I mentioned earlier. How do we get visibility into what's happened, and how do we now gain control over it? And like I said before, there's quite a few vendors out there that can assist with that. I don't advocate monitoring users for the sake of monitoring users. Don't surf the surfers. There's no point in that.
Right.
No.
Right.
But I completely agree with what Carl says there, though. If you can't see it, you can't improve it. Because we need to, and that visibility play, whether it, I'm not going to name names, but there's lots of technologies out there that will help you get a handle on, firstly, your inventory. I mean, from a security point of view, if you need to know from an asset perspective what you have in hardware, what you have in software, and who's using it. And then from an employee experience point of view, which is really about simplicity, you've got to know how it's performing. What's letting you down? Where's technology getting in the way? Where are the pinch points? Helping us to do rapid root cause analysis and improve both the security posture and the experience for the people using it. So yeah, absolutely right what Carl is saying. If you can't see it, then you can't manage it. And if you can't manage it, you can't improve it.
I think there's another subjective side of it though, right? Which is actually speaking to the end users, which is a lot of things that us as technologists see a lot of organizations fail at, because we get the analytics and we see something as poor or we see something as brilliant, for argument's sake. And then you actually speak to an end user and you get the subjective response, which is, oh, it's awful, right? Or it's really slow. It takes me 10 minutes to log on, but the data doesn't tell you that. The data says it's not, when actually it's not that. It's just one application when they're in a session. How many times have we all heard, right, that Citrix is slow, and then you monitor the session and it's not Citrix, it's one application within the session that's slow. It's that kind of perception and getting that feedback from the end user. And that's where gaining that information, that insight to overlay against the analytics is critical as well.
We have a couple of questions that found the new goal, they say. Monitoring the end device. Because earlier we didn't manage the end device other than the security and we get the application there, but we didn't actually took the system monitoring log and then go through every warning, everything that in that. But with the AI, we can do that for thousands of devices and get a new vision on how the actual end device works. Because it can be one application and your RAM goes through the roof or anything like that. And we don't see that when we have central monitoring. We just see that when we're monitoring from the end device, and that's where the user experience is. It's the end device. They don't
Yeah.
care about the server. They don't care about anything else. They see what's in front of them, and that's the end device.
And I think that's where we've seen like I think we discussed last time, where the first thing that comes out of most budgets from a project point of view is the monitoring tool set, because it's at that time for them the least important thing. It's an extra 100, 200 users versus a monitoring tool set, for argument's sake, and that gets stripped out. But that's the wrong way of looking at it, because if you actually use those tool sets the right way, you increase productivity, you increase user experience, you get better control visibility, and you can put the right tools in place to do the right job. And I think one of the things that I find is that everyone says, well, I need to make people more productive. The environment's not performing the way that it should. And it's like, well, what tool have you got monitoring it? Oh, I've just got SolarWinds looking at CPU, memory, and disk. I'm like, that's fantastic. What about the processes? What about user experience? What about the lag, the latency, the jitter, and all those kind of things? Are you monitoring end to end? You got AI ops running to start understanding this stuff, and they're the kind of things that people are starting now to take stock on, because they need that kind of stuff to make informed decisions.
Yeah, I do find that when people are at the purchasing end of the business, when you're launching a new product, people are so obsessed with, my applications require exactly this amount of I/O, and it's this much RAM, and it's this much disk space, and it's this shade of blue or this shade of pink. And then what happens is organizations, rightly or wrongly, go out and buy the least amount of answer kit and software to fix that moment in time problem. But the reality is, it's not a moment in time problem. That first build of infrastructure is just the starting point, because the reality, if the maths was so important to you at the beginning, well, when those applications, you go from version this to version that, or Office here to Office there, those I/O profiles change wildly, the resource requirements change wildly. And if you stop looking at it, essentially, and you keep on adding weight to the top, then the floor will cave in. Whatever we're talking about, Citrix is a great example. Those Citrix estates, especially on premise where it's pretty static, people go and buy the least amount of stuff they possibly can to provide the resources they need for that moment in time problem. Then for 3 or 4 or 5 years, pile more and more and more and more weight on top. But if you don't give yourself if you don't continue to the maths, and you don't continue to feed and water the platforms, the floor will cave in. And it's not the fault of a Citrix or a Microsoft or a VMware. It's actually our fault and your fault and everybody else's fault for not continuing to pay attention. And that's where, and I think that's one of my favorite things about the cloud desktop world, is that, I've sat there and I've signed off some pretty big purchases for thousands of servers. And if we get it 5% wrong, then that's a lot of money to have to put our hand in our pocket and buy you an extra lot of servers to get the resource going. But in the cloud world, we can work with assumptions, and we can test fast, and we can, if you need to go from, X amount of RAM to Y amount of RAM, we can do that in an hour at the flick of a switch. If equally, we can come down if it's not appropriate. And I think that the whole cloud approach has really de-risked and accelerated the ability to deploy the right workloads in the right places.
I think
customers.
Building on what you just said there as well, Adam, around that decreasing in size. But if we take it from a service provider perspective, so an IT department providing service to our customers or end users, let's just say pandemic, whatever happens, or we get lockdown X and retail goes through the floor again. The beauty about leveraging cloud-based systems with the right flexible contracts is you could scale your outgoing, your OpEx costs to ultimately zero. Yeah. Right? Whereas if you've done a CapEx procurement, you've got to try and get that money back on that kit, or you financed it, you still have to pay that bill even though you're not using it because all your staff are on furlough. And there's those kind of things that people are starting to think about, and everyone says moving from CapEx to OpEx and those kind of things. But one of the most common questions I get is, how do I capitalize cloud? The question is, why do you want to capitalize cloud? Right? There's an area where capitalizing cloud makes sense, and we can then forecast the minimum entry that you need to do your job, but the rest of it should be operational, because that's the whole point, it's operation.
And I think that it's not just about when it all hits the fan that we can reduce the amount of resource and expense in all of the different clouds by dropping down our usage. You can do this on a day-to-day basis, where we use WVD and Citrix and VMware together. It's not about how fast it'll scale up, because I can scale up on premise if you can get the kit. But it's the fact that at the end of the week, I can't send that kit back home. But what I can do is, probably 7 o'clock in the evening till 7 o'clock in the morning, we can really ramp down our consumption on those clouds. So we start to really zero in on only paying for what we're actually getting any value out of. And it's not an exact science at the moment. You know, it's not as good as the marketing would have you think, but that is the direction of travel. So we end up paying by the second for the resources we're using and nothing more. And it'll take a little while to get there, but that's what we've got to do. But you definitely need to have visibility, and you need to have the right information to help you plan and be one step ahead to make that kind of model work. But there's real savings in the cloud. If you, not so much, the savings in taking the eye out of VDI specifically. You don't need to worry about that infrastructure. It ain't yours. You don't need to worry about the risk and the fear of doing that big migration every 3 years that might bring the company to its knees if it goes slightly wrong on Monday morning, because the people that designed it, whether it's VMware or Citrix or Nutanix or Microsoft or whoever else, the people that designed it are now running the things. They're running the control plane for you. They're setting the standards. So I think there's all sorts of taking operational burden off you. But if you can get your head around understanding your people, understanding your processes, and understanding your own unique peaks and troughs across the course of a quarter or a day or a year, then you can really make some savings in cloud. But you have to do it right. You can't just lift and shift, or it'll be an expensive experiment, really.
I think everyone's gone on about, this building your on-premises architecture as if it's a cloud-like architecture, right? It's easier said than done, right? Because it comes at a cost. But we just put a very simple use case. I've had a few customers over the years that have bought VDI from the organization I work for, and we've ultimately designed it. We've got some GPUs in there, maybe some T4 cards from NVIDIA, for example. And then they're sat there now and the staff aren't working. And like, well, that kit could still be used, right? It's got a T4 card in it. That's good for AI and ML services. Why don't you repurpose those nodes to be more data analytics nodes during the night, for example, or during while everyone's on fail level? Get multi-use out of this kit rather than just think of it as, well, that's been bought for VDI, so it can only be used for VDI. And I think that's one of the things a lot of customers I speak to look at it and go, well, it's been bought for a specific reason, therefore I'm only using it for that reason. When actually there's a lot of value for it to be repurposed in an evening, for argument's sake, and things like that. I think that there's another area for people to go and look at what they've bought and why, and where it could be maybe used in a secondary position to maybe drive new revenue streams or insights.
Yeah. Peter, you've been a bit quiet. What are your thoughts on what's been said?
I've just been loving hearing the backwards and forwards between CDW and Softcat. You guys should just align on yourselves. You'd be like a dominant force. Sorry, what was the question? Simon?
I mean, look, I suppose there is, in my mind, there's a lot of complexity that we've spoken about, right? So IT operations, IT asset management, I think was something that Adam mentioned. It's like, you've got to know what you've got out there. Well, that I would have thought was more of an ITAM type of tool. Then you've got security tools that are out there. Then you've got management tools that are out there in terms of how do we actually apply policy, send down applications, manage Windows updates. And now we're talking about, measuring user experience as well. There isn't one solution that does all four of those things, right?
No, exactly. And there are a huge amount of different variables beyond that as well. You spoke about identity, access management. So all of that, there's user behavior. There's all sorts of different tool sets that you can incorporate. And I think at the moment, everyone's in a bit of guesswork. They don't actually know what they're trying to do. You could have someone who says, we're doing this digital transformation, but what does digital transformation really mean? Because nobody knows what they actually need to do to achieve it right now. I think, security is probably, if I was going to give any piece of advice, security is the best way to make sure you combat first of all. Because any company that says they're not going to be having any issues with breaches is lying. Everybody is going to be having real complex difficulties with overcoming any kind of security problems in their business. So that's probably the best thing to put your resources towards. But there are so many other areas. You even think from like a human resource point of view. There's the emotional, physical mental challenges that no one's thinking about, that this is, and even all of us have probably had moments during this period where we've kind of gone, this is tough, I'm not enjoying this, or I want to see some people, or this, I want to go into London for a coffee, and I want to hug someone. Exactly, missing my hug, Simon. So it's a real challenge at the moment that I don't think, there's no monitoring tools that can monitor what your mental stability is like at the moment, and it's going to be a real difficulty to kind of overcome all of those hidden challenges that we don't even know about. And this is going beyond IT. So we've got how's your performance, how's your your user performance, what's your computer working like, and they are going to continue to be problems, but there's some different variables that we've got to overcome, and I think that's, if you're looking for one area that I think will stay, it's this area of edge computing. And you're starting to see vendors really making shifts now about how they can start incorporating that and start to support those kind of complexities. There's all sorts of releases that have come out around SASE and edge solutions that are out there, and that for me is going to be very, very relevant in the next couple of months. But again, it comes back to, you've got to have visibility of what you've got. You've got to have an understanding of what you've got if you really want to achieve that next step. And if you haven't got that, don't throw all of your resources into something that you aren't going to be able to completely manage without being able to do that. So it is a bit of a catch-22 that everyone's in, but that's because there's so much complexity at the moment.
So spoken a lot about user experience management, spoken a lot about the cloud, and I think some of you have always said to me, when COVID came along, there were two types of people. There were those that had Citrix or VDI and those that didn't. And those that obviously had it, expanded it out, did what they could to expand that out. And those that didn't perhaps have gone down a different route, right? Government departments that I've heard have gone out and tried to buy, 100,000 laptops, and God knows where that taxpayers' money's gone and what it's being used for and how successful it's been. But one of the considerations that lots of people are looking at right now at the moment is obviously WVD. As soon as you put a hashtag in front of WVD, everybody seems to be interested in it. And yet the customers that I'm speaking with and the customers that we're deploying our technology to are very much still going with either Citrix or VMware. As you look to the next 6, 9, 12 months, what are the key reasons why people should be looking at Citrix and VMware, even if it's on top of, multi-win desktops that are being run out of Azure? We mentioned auto-scaling, scaling up, scaling down. I mean, is that a key reason? Or do you feel that there is a place now for native WVD?
I don't mind taking the first point on this one. I think it depends on what you want, right? And Microsoft say this as well, is that WVD today is a use case specific working solution. So if you need lots of enterprise grade overlays, so like the offloading functionality, the granular controls, the compression of the USB, the periphery pass-through support, and all these various other things that are not quite there yet with WVD, because let's be brutally honest here, it's still RDP or remote FX kind of scenarios. So it's still using that, I'd say, legacy technology, but with a little bit more of an enhancement to it. I think if we fast forward 12, 18 months time, I think some of that functionality you would get from those enterprise overlays will be within WVD natively. And at that point, then there is an argument to say, well, for that 10% that Citrix or VMware or WorkSpot or whoever is going to give me, do I need that versus just using it native? And then it comes back to the commercial risk and user experience conversation, as it always is. But today, if you were going to run rich media content, Adobe Creative Cloud services, and all that kind of stuff natively from WVD, it probably wouldn't be my first choice. I'd be looking at an overlay on top of WVD as an underlay with an enterprise overlay like Citrix or VMware, or even Frame to an extent.
Yeah. Yeah, don't
But I
forget.
think that the old saying that we are, as a company, we're going to go with one solution. We're going to go all in Citrix or all in VMware, because that's what's mostly was before. I think that's gone, and we can take 10% of our workforce can do WGD directly. They don't need anything else. They don't need the purples and all of that. And we have a couple of applications that's going to run on our Citrix environment in our basement, in our data center. And we have a couple of applications that could run natively in WD or any other cloud solutions. I think we're going to have multiple cloud solutions and a connector in the middle that connects this for the users, because frankly, we don't have one type of workforce. Our users in the company work in so many different ways that we can't say that we have one solution that fits all of these different solutions.
I think the
I'd
challenge
agree
as
with
well,
that.
right, as it always is that you put it in, like Adam mentioned earlier, for the here and now and what you know, and then Microsoft Teams comes around the corner and your user density and everything drops considerably because of the resource overheads, and then you have to redesign it over and over again. So I think that move to that kind of iterative lifecycle management rather than waterfall style view of the world is key now, especially in the end user space, because things are evolving far too quickly. Look at Apple's announcement of the M1 chip and everything that they've released recently. What's that going to bring to market for the other people in the market? Because let's be fair, right? Apple are probably going to look at selling that M1 chip to other providers in the near future and becoming an equivalent to maybe an Intel or an AMD or kind of approach, allowing them to take market share in an area they don't do today, because they need to diversify as a business, because they can't just keep on selling iPhones and iPads for the rest of the time, because they'll become stagnant. So it'd be interesting to see what happens in that space as well, around new vendors and new market spaces for the silicon side of the fence.
It's definitely, for me, like the point you made about that multi-cloud approach is, you know, if that's the difference between WVD and these other vendors. WVD is Azure only. There is no other data center you can use, no other cloud you can use. That is your choice. So with Citrix and VMware, you have got that freedom of choice, and you have got that vast public cloud or data center on-prem option available to you. And yes, the great thing about cloud, to Adam's point, it's taken the I out of VDI, but it is still a virtual desktop. And we have all been employed in this industry for the last 20 odd years or so, because virtual desktop is so very complicated. Yes, the infrastructure part played a big part in that complexity, but it was the end user experience that was the main factor in winning over those projects, making sure those projects worked. And if you put WVD in and the user experience is still poor, guess what? It's a virtual desktop failed project. Exactly the same as we've been through. So that's the reason why. It's nothing to do with, oh, look, we can achieve auto scaling and it's going to make you a cost saving here, there, and everywhere. Yeah, that's a possibility. But it's the end user experience at the end of the day. And if Citrix or a VMware product is giving you that extra user experience that WVD native can't, and is allowing you to use any public cloud, that's the reasons why you'd look into that service.
Yeah. I would echo what what everybody said, really. We've had a lot. I mean, we've done an awful lot of WVD deployments native, but you've got to choose the right use case. As long as you keep it within its limits, it's perfect. Like everything else, and as long as it's within the limits, it's perfect. And broadly speaking, the way, you know, this is a bit of a general sweeping statement, but if you are using a Microsoft, if you are completely in the Microsoft world and you're using OneDrive and you're using basic office productivity tools and you're using Teams and you're within that stack, actually, it's bloody brilliant. And if you work with people like all of us, to be fair, that know what they're doing, we can help you set it up correctly from the off, and we'll teach you how to do the user experience, which will make it a success. But there's just hard lines in there. As soon as you need to deploy, as soon as you have an application that's latency sensitive and needs to sit to right next to the back end on premise or somewhere else, whether it's in AWS or, you know, Rackspace or wherever, then you have to add on Citrix and VMware. And for me, the difference between those two then is, well, all of this, you still need to access this stuff through a device. right? Whether it's personal or whether it's corporate owned, you still have to access it through a device, which means you still need to manage that device. So if you've now got a world where you've got multi-cloud VDI and you've got a big device fleet to manage, and that could be Linux devices, ruggedized devices, frontline workers, all that type of stuff, that's not just generic office style working, that's where VMware starts to separate out from Citrix. So I think there is a bit of, I think they all do have their own relevance, which is good. You know, there are certain bits where they overlap in the, you know, Venn diagram of all this, but they all have their own place. And for God's sake, don't buy a Band-Aid.
Oh, we lost Adam.
We've lost him. I think we've lost him. Don't buy a Band-Aid.
Left on that cliff edge.
You have now.
Oh, is he back? No, he's not back.
I think this is more of an important point, though, right? This just to the point of this. Working from home is great as long as the infrastructure in your area supports it, right? And your local infrastructure in your homes and all those kind of things. Because sending people to work from home that have constraints on ISPs in areas or don't have an ISP in there because they live in the middle of nowhere, then you're going to get these kind of challenges, right? You can't work from home. It doesn't work. Imagine trying to do, let's just say that, I know this is a one-off for Adam, right? It's probably just something, a blip in the network, but let's just say this was a constant, right? You're only either going to have 1 to 2 megs worth of throughput because you're in the middle of nowhere. How do you work from home on that? Well, ultimately, you can't with all the new rich media stuff, so you need to find a new way of doing it.
Yeah.
And that's why I think a lot of organizations have had that blanket statement. We've seen quite a few in the news that have come out and said everyone work from home. It's just not possible for some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's the difference, and that's going to be the challenge in those that are going to the cloud and those that don't go to the cloud, and they're in between, because we talk about the rich media and we talk about the video media. That's the new normal. When we have this live event, when we have the webinar, we are streaming a couple of streams, but how much in this big picture are changing? It's just my lips, maybe my hands. That's the only thing that changes, but the camera always sends the whole picture, and that get a lot of bandwidth. But they are fixing this now, that they're going to use II for sending just the changing pixels, and the other thing.
Isn't one of the vendors, like spinning with CN and with X, already got a protocol that does that, right? That they could OEM and send off to other people.
I think they are. but that's one thing that's, if you have a cloud environment and you get you in the operations, you're going to have to handle this IGEL new normal, because it's going to change every month or so. In the past, we did a scale up, we did a Citrix environment, we did an IGEL environment or something, and we know that this is going to last 3-5 years, and we know what we were going to do the couple of years in front of us. We always know what's coming. Now we don't know. That's the new operations challenge, I think.
Yeah.
Everyone's been saying about hybrid data center, right? It's hybrid workspaces. The future, it's the way that it needs to run. I think Adam mentioned it earlier as well. Why people have been buying M365 licenses, because it allows you to manage your physical endpoints. It gives you your Office license, and it gives you Teams. You get discounted rates on WVD. Why wouldn't you start taking advantage of all that stuff? And I think I've been preaching this for years anyway, but having an endpoint you can work on offline, on the case that you can't work online because of connectivity reasons or whatever it might be, is a must. Otherwise, in this scenario, if I didn't have anything to work offline on, how would I work if my internet went down? I would become completely unproductive and have to take an annual leave day. Or my organization would have to be very amenable to me not being productive, or because it's not like I can get a pen and paper out because I haven't got secure filing or anything like that, right? Heaven forbid I should ever need to get a pen and paper out. But there's those kind of situations as well. And I think having that hybrid world, being able to have offline working and online working playing nicely together is key for a lot of people that do a lot of traveling and working from home. If people ever do return to an office and just be office-based again, and the organization decides that we don't really want to factor in business continuity for them like they have done in the past, which would be crazy, then yeah, having an online-only solution is perfect, but it's not the only answer.
Yeah. I do think, coming back to something I said earlier, I do think the whole onboarding is another key topic, right? If you were employed for an organization and you were set up and you had a device and you had to then go and work from home, that was one thing. But you've also got this whole, the amount of people I see at the moment who are jumping from one organization to another or are looking for new work, for instance. How do you bring those new employees on? How do you roll out new applications? It's quite interesting. And I hope I'm not giving this a plug where it shouldn't be, but I was contacted by NHS Track and Trace recently. And I was talking to her and she actually started by saying, my Amazon workspace application is telling me X. And so it's fairly obvious that in a way of trying to get those people ramped up and deployed out with the online form that they have to fill out when they're talking to someone, they're obviously using AWS and virtual desktops to enable that, which is quite interesting. But you just look at that and you think, how else would you deploy tens of thousands of desktop stroke applications to people during the pandemic when you needed to implement something like test and trace before? And I'm not saying that test and trace is the best example to be using at the moment, but it was just interesting to see that a virtual desktop solution was being used as a way of enabling that. We have had a question, which is, how do you handle multimedia, especially video conferencing within VDI? This person is using IGEL and is using Cisco. And mentioned support for Zoom and Teams, which is great, but what do you do when you come across other technologies and other conferencing utilities? And I think perhaps, Kyle, that comes back to the need sometimes to have this hybrid type of environment. I know we've seen a massive uptick in the amount of people that are actually deploying Linux third-party applications down to our OS and running them natively. Yeah. So yes, we can do Teams offloading and Zoom offloading inside the Citrix environment, but there's no reason if I fire up my IGEL OS now, I've actually got applications that are installed locally to try and overcome some of that. But I think that comes back down to the hybrid, right? Which is, I think, in my opinion, modern management and some form of VDI desktop as a service is the solution moving forward.
Yeah, and that's pretty much, I was typing the answer to Andre's question in the chat when you raised it, and it is that hybrid. Well, that's what that sticky plaster is there for right now, until, as we all know, right, we can't put solutions in place for every single product in the market because it'd just be not cost effective for people like IGEL and Citrix and wherever else. So that's where, as technologists, we need to look at it and say, well, what are the main platforms that we want to support? And then how do we get those main platforms to be supported in the environments that we run? And that's where the hybrid model comes in. I've had customers initially when Teams was introduced where the offload wasn't working as it should do, let's say, where they basically ended up installing it locally onto their endpoint and then pulling it into the VDI session instead. So it was doing like a reverse pullback ultimately. And that allowed them to have the local experience of Teams whilst using a virtual desktop without having to come out of the desktop to go to Teams and all that kind of desktop in a desktop kind of rigmarole that may happen. I think there's things like that you can still do, but I think it's that code of conduct, that standards, what you're willing to support and what you're not, and making that very clear to your end users. So there's an expectation set. The last thing you want is to go, yeah, we support video conferencing, and then all these random video conferencing platforms start to get procured via credit cards in different departments and they don't work. So I think as an IT department, set out your standards, set out what you support and what you don't support, and make it a public facing service catalog. That's the best way of keeping people up to date. Yeah.
Okay. We better wrap up. Can I get 1 minute from each of you on what we might see in Q1 2021? Or let's just say 2021. Let's not try and limit it. What to watch out for next year from a technology point of view?
Shall I go first?
Can you? I thought we were going to say Carl's holiday photos or something. That's to watch out for 2021.
Yeah, my Instagram snaps.
Yeah.
Well,
Adam.
Oh, sorry. I just assumed. Oh, I think you're going to get a lot more. Can you hear me? Can you have I shared my screen? I think that's going to continue till next year, just like now. Look, I think that next year is going to be the year.
You're on mute, Adam.
Oh.
No, you're not.
I was going to say something very blue then, which I'm not going to say because we would definitely have to edit that out. Yeah, so I think next year is going to be the year where the design principles around the remote-ready workforce really come into play, and everybody buys into it. We don't know whether we're going to be 100% from home or 100% from the office, so we're probably going to be somewhere in the middle. So I think that's going to be a real thing. I think that moving as much stuff to the cloud as works for you is going to make sense because it's going to give you that agility. I think you should be obsessive about choosing the right tools and offering choice, but not introducing chaos. To Kyle's earlier section there, it's fine to offer choice, but you don't have to offer them everything. And then I also think that there's going to be a massive push around the low code, no code, app development and automation. There's so much you can do for that user level automation. I'm obsessed with it at the moment. It's my new favorite thing. I lose hours tinkering around with all the little stuff I could possibly automate. I really think that's going to find its flow next year, and it makes so much difference with a big distributed workforce and trying to help people move as one and offer consistency. So That's probably more than a minute, but that's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah. Michael?
Kyle? Michael?
I would think that we're going to see a lot of company and business and organizations that are going to need to change their IT strategy to be able to handle the cloud better. We're going to see a change in the governance between developers and companies at all, because they are going to need a different set of management to handle the cloud. So we don't get an IT department that buys one cloud and a developer department that buys another cloud, and they're not ready competitively for each other. So I think that type of cleanup needs to be done in 2021. We have done the security more or less during the fall now. So now it's time to go down hardcore for the strategy and change that, update it.
Good. Thank you, Michael. Kyle?
I think next year for me, well, hopefully a vaccine would be a nice win for everybody, I think, and then we can get back to some kind of normality, whatever that looks like. From a technology point of view, I think a lot of organizations are going to be taking stock of what they've done and why, readdressing their current business strategies and goals, and realigning their technical plans against them. That's what I think there's going to be a lot of happening in Q1, Q2 next year. And then Q3, Q4 will be more aligned to executing against whatever they've come up with, whether that is around low code, no code, citizen app dev style approaches, whether it's through moving to the cloud-based services, capitalizing cloud, whether it's around opening new offices, how do we do mergers and acquisitions potentially? Because I think that's going to be a big thing next year. But from a technology point of view, things are just keeping a rapid change. I think everyone needs to start looking at iterative processes like DevOps and things like that to understand how things are changing and managing that amount of change over a period of time. I think they're going to be the bigger changes we're going to see next year.
Yeah. And finally, Peter?
I'm just surprised that I haven't seen an invention of a big giant red button that has mute, unmute written on it that you can just hit at any time. When you know, so like you're always scrambling for the mouse, go mute, unmute, whatever it is. Yeah. So I'm looking for that next year. The big red button.
Yeah.
That's what I want. But in all seriousness, if I was going to say what technology is going to be, it's going to something to enhance the collaboration with your end users. This is good, but it's not that good. I think there's more that we can get from messenger tools, bot tools, things like that we'll start to start seeing in the mainstream. We haven't seen the best from vendors yet, and I think we'll start to see a lot more of those tools incorporated even into the IGEL OS, for instance, in how to sort of incorporate and communicate better with your end users. That for me is certainly what I think we'll start to see.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, I think automation is definitely one to watch. I mean, if you look at Automation Anywhere and Blue Prism and those types of organizations, they've definitely had a great deal of investment. And I know particularly in some verticals like healthcare, they're having a massive input. And I think I sent out a tweet a while ago that said, how important is automation in EUC? I think I would completely agree with that. I think the conversations we've had today around user experience is very, very interesting, because I do think that as more and more of what we do moves up into the cloud, it's IT's responsibility to make sure that that cloud is delivering a level of service down to our employees, to make sure, to your points, that they're engaged and they're productive. So I can see those two things being incredibly important. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks for a call. We've been on almost an hour, so a little bit over. Thank you for all the attendees that have attended today. Thank you to anyone that obviously is watching. I hope that next year that I will be paying for a flight for Michael to come over to London and join the rest of us as we deliver a session perhaps like this, but from a pub or a bar somewhere in London. And we'll obviously try and invite as many people along in person as we can do. But I would love to think that we are a step closer now to actually having this conversation live, face to face. And I mean that, Michael. Get ready as soon as we can do it. You've got my word. And as opposed to us coming to you, we'll fly you over to London and we'll run this. We'll run this session live and record it somewhere where we can be together. So thanks very much, guys. Stay safe. And yeah, look forward to speaking with you all again soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you. Okay, we're good. Thank you. Cheers, Carl.
Cheers, mate. Catch you later.
Yeah, cheers, mate.